So one of the things, one of the reasons why we are testing this new platform, it's not a new platform. Most of you in the 365 world already use Teams, but we moved to this platform so we could have we could capture our our interactions, not just with voice, with the recording, but also in the chat, because a lot of you do share, and some of the discussions you have are, James and I were saying, they are golden. The information that you guys exchange with each other are absolutely golden, and we will, of course, ensure that we capture all of that so we can make a more proactive approach in whatever issues we identify and whatever knowledge we can share with the community on this one. Okay, let me quickly move on to my introductions. And let me move to my next one. So I just want to quickly mention that two of our executive members at the IRMS is helping us out more proactively with the roundtables and the CAV, and that's David Reeve, our secretary, and of course, quite important in our GISC world, And then we've got Penny Wright as well, who is our digital and training Penny person at IRMS. Now, who I want to present as well is James Lappin from Loughborough University. Just say a quick hello, James, to everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, and of course, we're honored to have Susan Lam with us from Shell International Limited. So, Susan, just a quick hi from you.
Yes, hi everyone. Nice to be here in this wet day from London.
Okay. It looks very sunny where you are, Susan.
Yeah, it's an illusion, optical illusion. It's absolutely pouring down outside.
Nice and bright. Okay, and we're also joined by some of our SMEs. I haven't checked if Bruce was here, but we'll see. So we have Vivek Bhatt from Infotection. Say
hi, everyone.
And of course, Bruce Mason. Bruce, are you on the call now?
I am here, but I did the usual thing of not unmuting myself.
Okay, very, very common. So Bruce Mason is our Exchange SME at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, who will interact with you on the chats if there are questions on Exchange. Specifically, he is our man at HPE. Thank you. And of course, I'd like to introduce our attendees from the National Archives. Now, I only have acceptances, so if I checked this early this morning. So we've got from NARA. Everybody knows where NARA is. We collaborate with them a lot. So that's the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration. We've got Beth Cron and Kevin DeVorsey. Beth, Kevin, are you here? Beth and Kevin? Okay, they're probably joining us.
Yes, we are here.
There she is. Hi, Beth.
Hello.
Kevin. And Kevin as well. Yes, very important. We've got some, a lot of the mail policies are coming from NARA, so we've got some questions for you. That'll be good. We've got, I don't know if Peter Francis managed to join us from the Public Records Office, Victoria, Australia, but if you have, Peter, say hello.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh, wow. It's 2:30 in the morning in Australia. Thank you, Peter. It's really quite interesting that you managed to join us. So thank you, Peter.
I won't say anything very sensible though.
At 2:30 in the morning, we understand. But you come from the home of ISO 15489-1 and -2. So there we go. Of course, we also have Arkiverket in full force. That's the National Archives of Norway. And we've got Espen Sjovol, Martha Rosenvinge, and Sophia Sardquist.
Well, Espen is present, and I must say, Sophia is at the Swedish National Archives. So it's not the same, but that's okay. I don't think she's online at the moment. So
Yes, Sophia from the Swedish National Archives. Very important that you guys are on board. We all collaborate on these things. Sophia? Okay, she'll probably join us later. And of course, we have to welcome our own UK National Archives, Nikki Welsh. Nikki?
Hi, Maria. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and lots more thank you for everything else. And let's see if Hugh Hagen has managed to join us from the National Records of Scotland. Hugh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Maria, and good afternoon, everyone from Edinburgh, where it's also manky, to use a good Scottish vernacular word.
Thank you, Hugh. And of course, but last but not the least, Christina from the Swiss Federal Archives.
For the like annual report they do, like the keeper's annual report. It was like
Christina,
a
we managed to join us from the Swiss Federal Archives. Yes. Okay. So what I will do now, as I hand over to James Lappin, what I would do is, if everybody can go off their turn off their camera like I'm doing right now, what I will do is I will mute everyone so we could listen in to James Lappin. And of course, James, don't forget to unmute yourself when you start your presentation. So I will stop presenting now and mute everyone. And James, handing over to you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Sharing my presentation now. Okay, so I want to start with a question, which is, email's been the main form of correspondence for the past quarter of a century. So why are we still talking about it as though it was is a problem? And I think the reason for it is that when we think back to when email came in, for most of the world, email was a massive step forward, because instead of correspondence having to be moved by human beings from a sender to a recipient, machines could move it, and they could move it instantly. And instead of correspondence having to be filed by human beings, machines could file it, and they could file it instantly into an email account where the recipient could not only get access to it, but refer back to it days, weeks, months later. But for us records managers, that's actually a step backwards, because before email, many organisations, the type that we work for, had very sophisticated filing systems in which they organised their correspondence. And email replaced those sophisticated, complex filing systems with a very, very simple structure for correspondence based purely on who was the individual sender or recipient, and within that, a chronological order. And it left us with a policy dilemma that we still haven't solved, because we only have two options in this situation. We can either reject the order in which the email systems are organising correspondence and set up separate, more sophisticated filing structures. But that brings with it the problem that we are then having to file into those structures with human beings, and that human filing is going to be slower and less consistent and reliable as the automated filing of the email system. Or we can accept the way that email systems have organised correspondence, and we can work to try to mitigate the worst effects of that structure. In other words, we can try to make email accounts manageable. So I'm not going to try to come up with an opinion as to which of these two policies is better, partly because I think it's a purely academic question, partly because these are both legitimate records management approaches. They both require professional records management skills, and they're both legitimate within archival theory. If Sir Hilary Jenkinson said that records should be managed in their original order, and probably email accounts are the original order of correspondence over the past 25 years. But another founding father, Theodore Schellenberg, said that email records should be organised by business activity and function, and email accounts certainly do not do that. So we've got theoretical warrant for applying whichever of those two policies. The problem isn't choosing which is the best policy. The problem is that so far we have not had the capability to deliver on either of these two policies. So for the past 25 years, we have neither been able to make email accounts manageable, nor have we been able to extract business emails consistently and move them to a better structure for record keeping. So you could argue that a third approach is possible, which is to say to all our colleagues, look, use email as little as possible and instead use different forms of communication, ring each other up or whatever. The problem with that is, I think, been illustrated with the rise of Microsoft Teams, because Microsoft Teams has succeeded in taking a big chunk of correspondence out of email, which is something that we've wanted for a long time. But when you look at how that correspondence is flowing and where it's being stored, most of it's gone through individual chat. And so those individual Teams chat accounts pose us exactly the same policy dilemma as email accounts do. We either have to try and make the individual Teams chats manageable, or we have to find some way of moving business Teams chat out of the account. And you'll also notice that it's even harder to deliver on both of these options in the Teams chat environment than it is on the email environment. So I think the way forward is to start thinking about what capabilities we need to deliver on these options. So if we want to make email accounts manageable, for me, email was the first method of organising correspondence where an individual couldn't start on day one of their work and inherit access to their predecessor's correspondence, right? And to me, the benchmark for whether we've got to a point where we can make email accounts manageable is, can we allow a successor to inherit their predecessor's business correspondence? And in order to do that, I think we need to be able to do three things. I think, first of all, we need to be able to set different retention rules on email accounts according to the relative importance of an individual. And then having earmarked some email accounts, not all, for medium or long-term preservation, we need to be able to separate personal correspondence within those email accounts from business correspondence, and we need to secure the consent of the end user, the owners, if you like, of those email accounts, to their successors inheriting the correspondence in that account minus their personal correspondence. Okay. In order to manage, in order to deliver on a policy option of moving business emails out of email accounts, we need to be able to build, hold, and display a corporate record structure, and it needs to be better than the structure of email accounts. We need to be able to consistently identify business emails and assign it to that structure. And this has been the weak point that we've had over the past 25 years. And we need to be able to manage the correspondence that we've assigned to that structure through that structure. Just a couple of observations. Firstly, on this policy, we've got the ability to build corporate record structures. I mean, many organisations have been doing that over the past 25 years. But if anything, it's getting harder because of the way systems have moved on. So for most of the past 25 years, we would have held the corporate record structure within a document management system, either an EDRM or a collaborative system like SharePoint. Now Microsoft Teams has come along. We really got to question whether we've reached the end of the road for keeping a corporate record structure within a document management system. And if that is the case, I think, for example, the conversation with Microsoft are going to have to be about, well, can we store a corporate record structure outside of any application, independent of an application, and then start to apply it not just to emails in email accounts, but also to other to content in other applications. Yeah. And the other thing I would say is that it appears to me that the capabilities we need to make email accounts manageable are easier to train a machine in, because it's a binary decision, is this a personal email or not, than the actions we'd need a machine to take if we were getting a machine to file emails outside of email accounts, because that would require a machine to understand a relatively complex filing structure, and that would be a non-binary decision. So it does occur to me that that's another reason why I don't want to get into a debate over which of the two policies is better, because I actually think that the policy of making email accounts manageable might be a prerequisite or a stepping stone to actually being able to deliver on a policy of managing email outside of email accounts. Because after all, if a machine couldn't separate personal from business email, you would not trust that machine to move emails out of the email accounts. Yeah. Now, Maria's set up this great dialogue with Microsoft, and I think it's worth taking a look at Microsoft's product strategy towards email. Not that we have to adopt their view of email, but if we're going to influence them, we need to understand where they're coming from on email. And I think one of the things to bear in mind about Microsoft is that they have never supported a policy of moving business email out of email accounts. So when they moved into the document management space with SharePoint, even though they had the market leading document management system and the market leading email system, they never integrated them. They never provided a drag and drop integration to encourage people to move business emails out of Exchange. And I think that's partly because they think that Exchange is a perfectly decent, robust repository to store email in. But I also wonder if it's, well, I'm also convinced that it's because they think that email is best understood within the email environment. And if you think about their competitive duel with Google, the duel between Microsoft and Google over cloud suites will be won by whichever of them has the best machine learning at the end of the day. And I think if you look at what Microsoft have done since they brought Exchange and Outlook and SharePoint into the cloud environment, I think you'll see that they see advantages in email just staying where it is. So if you look at the machine learning they provided in Delve and in Cortex, that is underpinned by something called the Microsoft Graph. And Microsoft Graph is basically just an accumulation of events, records of events that have happened inside the cloud suite. So if I emailed, say I sent an email to Maria with a document attached that's about records management policy towards email, Graph records that I sent something to Maria and that it's about email and records management, and it's learned something. It's learned something about the document, and it's learned something about me, and it's learned something about Maria, and it can use that knowledge. So in other words, it's using the knowledge within email and within all the other applications within the suite to drive its recommendations, to drive its personalized search results, and you'll see more and more of that. So it kind of bears out Hilary Jenkinson's belief that records are best understood in their original location, probably not Microsoft's intention. But I do think we're not going to get very far with Microsoft if we're trying to get them to help us to move business email out of the email system. I don't see why it's going to be in their interest to help us do that. And this is why I think we should really think about where we want to go with our corporate structures, the types of things in the past we might have called a file plan or a business classification. Because just because we're not thinking, we might not be thinking in the future of moving emails into somewhere like SharePoint, doesn't mean we should give up on the idea of having a corporate structure to manage the application of retention rules too. I still think it's a good idea. I just think we need to be flexible about where it lives. Now, the other thing I think we should really talk about Microsoft with is, okay, if Microsoft don't want us to move emails out of email accounts, fine, but they really need to provide us with a workable model by which we can help make emails manageable inside email accounts, inside email systems. And I'm not convinced they've done that yet, because in theory they have, because they've said, all right, we've got a cloud suite, M365, we'll build a compliance center, and in that compliance center we'll allow administrators to create retention policies and apply them to any aggregation within the cloud suite, whether it's an email account, Teams chat account, Teams, OneDrive accounts, SharePoint sites, whatever. It's all treated equally. You can apply a retention policy, and you can make available retention labels for individuals to tag individual content if they want it to have a different retention rule than the aggregation it's in. So that's great. But when you look at what it turns out in reality is that you have most bits of content inside Office 365 will end up, if you're using policies a lot and labels a lot, will end up with multiple different policies and labels applied to them, right? And then with multiple different rules. And Microsoft's solution to those clashes is that they've created a very arbitrary set of rules and principles, and they've said this is how any retention classes will be sorted out by this order of rules. And it's messy, it's not clear to end users, it's not always clear to administrators. And when it comes to this specific issue of managing email, making email accounts manageable, it doesn't work in the right way for us, because if we were serious about making email accounts manageable, we wouldn't want the rules to be applied in this way. We wouldn't want a longest retention period to always win over, because if we have an email account of someone important in our organization that we want to keep for a relatively long period, we would want either them as an individual to label or a machine classifier to label their personal email with a retention rule that is shorter than the rule on the email account. And we would want that shorter period to win over. So I think we have to, I just think with retention, if you remember back to the electronic records management specifications that our communities wrote at the very start of this century, the retention component of that was the most complex part and took up most of the pages of those specifications, because you have to do it in a very, very rigorous manner. And Microsoft have been able to to do their own thing. They haven't had to follow any of those specifications, but the downside is that their retention application lacks the rigor that we had in those specifications. And I think it would be mutually beneficial to engage with a dialogue with them about that. I just want to conclude by talking about the impact of Teams, because, like I said, one of the cornerstones of any policy to move business emails out of email accounts is that you have to have somewhere to store the order in which you actually want correspondence to be organized. And for the first decade of this century, many organizations used EDRM systems to do that. In the second decade, many records managers worked really hard to put a corporate information architecture into the SharePoint environment. And what I think Teams has done, and the rise of Teams has done, is it's come in and it's cannibalized the information architecture that many organizations had set up in SharePoint. And it's done it by a very simple means of every time you create a team, it comes with its own document library. So if you'd set up an information architecture to, in theory, cover all corporate activities, suddenly Teams come in and it's setting up a parallel architecture of document libraries. So that really means that we've got a question: where do we put our corporate information architecture, our corporate record structure, the structure in which those of us working for organizations that want to move business email out of email would file those emails? Where do we put it now? And I think that's, and I think what we should be saying to Microsoft is, okay, Teams has been an incredible success. They're hardly going to on the introduction of Teams, so there's not much mileage in trying to boost SharePoint up against Teams. But I think we ought to say to them, look, this has had a side effect, and the side effect is we've got nowhere to put our information architecture. Microsoft have a file plan function within the compliance center, but really that's just a way of allowing an administrator to have one place to look at all their labels. It's not really, it doesn't fit the bill in terms of a place to hold, display, maintain and apply a record structure that we want to use as a vehicle to apply retention and maybe even access rules. Okay, thank you very much, Maria. Thanks all.
Thank you very much, James. That is, you should see the chat window. It's quite interesting. One of the things that we mentioned previously as well, it's in terms of our email policies is has to do with the regulations that we look at more commonly. Like, I know NARA is one of those, James, and of course our own National Archives. So what was it, James? So we could ask Beth, Kevin, and Nikki as well. James?
Oh, sorry, a question.
Yes. If you could, we did mention that it's something that we need to ask Nara.
I was saying to Maria that having Nara on the line is really interesting for us in Europe and UK, because Nara has been adopted a different policy to email over the past 7 or 8 years, where they've asked federal agencies to select important email accounts for permanent preservation, and they've encouraged federal agencies to try and find ways to separate out personal and trivial emails from those accounts. And I just wonder if you could say something about how federal agencies have been getting on with that policy.
Beth, Kevin?
Okay, I'm going to attempt here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Beth, we can hear you. We can see you.
Okay. Yeah, so the capstone policy, since that came out in the bulletin, I'll share that in the, excuse me, in the link in the chat in a minute. That came out in 2013. Since then, I should know off the top of my head the percentage of agencies that have moved to that approach, but it's by far the majority. Maybe about 90% of agencies have moved to that. And I think it's been a much more helpful approach for managing emails. So I think of all of the agencies, and also we have a general record schedule for Capstone that addresses emails and calendars. And we're in the process of expanding that out to also include electronic messages of Capstone officials as well. So does that answer the question?
James?
How do federal agencies find it?
Let me think. I think that they find it a better approach. I think there's definitely, we've heard a lot of challenges as far as implementing it in Microsoft 365. I think the challenges come with implementing the policy and tracking the officials. So being able to have a tool that will say, this person entered a capstone role on September 1st, and if they're in an acting position, or if they're in a permanent position, or when they exit. And that's why I found that the concept of getting access to your predecessor's emails is very interesting. And I think that's a big challenge. And we've also been thinking more lately about the challenges of encryption and how that can play some challenges with getting access to email and capturing senior officials' emails as well. So Kevin is telling me he's not able to make his audio work. And so, yeah, so he's just saying the reason we implemented Capstone is that we weren't getting transfers of agency emails. And so now agencies are definitely implementing the Capstone policies, and they're trying a lot of different approaches. So it's an ongoing discussion for how we can improve it over time.
That's quite interesting. And Nikki, because the NARA approach is very different from the UK approach, and I could imagine even Espen, how are you guys on this one for those of us who are submitting, for our community who are submitting their records or trying to comply with it from the email side? Nikki?
Hi, Maria. Yeah, so we have not endorsed the capstone approach in England as yet. I think it's a conversation that we're probably overdue to have as a community, if I'm honest. I think James has done some really valuable research that we have been able to support him with in looking at whether our existing policy, which promotes the movement of email from inboxes into record keeping systems, is a valid policy, and if it's working on the ground, and what's the likelihood then of email records being selected for transfer to TNA. Research has conclusively proved that we're on a bit of shaky ground there. So it's interesting to hear Beth say that that one of the reasons that they have gone down the capstone route is because they were not receiving email records from their agencies. I think that is something probably that we're going to see replicated here, and possibly we need to start thinking about this a bit more urgently. I do know that there are some government departments who are moving towards a more capstone approach. So they are keeping whole mailboxes of senior officials with a view to later reviewing them and selecting emails from them from transfer to TNA. But I think it's the same question or the same concern that they have with all of digital record selection is what tools to deploy to find the emails of value and to get rid of the emails that are personal or sensitive or don't have value, rather than because they definitely don't want to transfer the mailbox wholesale because of concerns around GDPR, etc., which we've seen in the campaign as well.
Yeah.
So kind of to be confirmed, I think, over here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Beth, and thanks, Nikki. Now, I am very pleased to introduce to everyone. So this is our learning presentation. Let me introduce everyone, Susan Lamb, and she is managing quite an enormous task with Share International Limited, and it is very interesting to hear. And you've heard, Susan, the challenges that we are having in this space, and we are very keen to see the approach from that commercial oil and gas vertical side, considering how big Shell is. I will give the floor to you, Susan, and thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me, everyone, and see my slides?
Yes, we can, Susan.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me here today. Really happy to talk to you about this. I have to say I feel slightly intimidated because we've got a lot of really knowledgeable people here, probably far more knowledgeable than me, and purist record managers, which I absolutely don't claim to be at all. So slightly daunted by the fact they're going to talk to you. But if you're happy to hear what our perspective is, then very happy to share it. My background, just a little bit on me, is I've worked at Shell 20 years, and my background is in the law. I'm a UK qualified solicitor, and I started Shell as a UK environmental lawyer, actually. And then about, I don't know, maybe 12 or 14 years ago, I moved into the compliance office, which is where records management compliance sits. It's a subsection of legal. And I'm the subject matter expert for the retention and disposal of information in Shell. And I'm the product owner for that part of the compliance center in M365. So I've been doing this a while, and we've been through a lot of different cycles around this in terms of getting our house in order. And Microsoft 365 has really helped us in the last few years make a step change in our ability to manage our information. Obviously, not just around retention and disposal. It's played a huge part in all sorts of other areas of information management compliance that manage and how we manage our risk in that area. But today I'm just going to focus on the group record management side of that. So I've just got a slide here which shows the information management life cycle. And we have used the M365 SharePoint functionality, labeling functionality, which we implemented, I think it's a couple of years ago now when we upgraded to the new user interface. And I use that very much to manage our information in place. We use the SharePoint retention labels to label our information in SharePoint. And it allows us to keep our information and our records in one place. And that's a really big advantage for us. In the past, we had a system called, well, had several names, but it's basically HP Trim. And that really sat on the edge of our IT landscape and caused complexity and cost, and basically meant people having to put records in that and keep their other information in SharePoint or LiveLink, as the worst case was before that. And that was really, really difficult for end users to do that. and obviously then impacted on our compliance. So our approach is super focused on the end user. Our objective is to make it as easy as possible for people to identify information and label it correctly with the right retention period. So in my role as SME for retention and disposal, I also own the group retention schedule shell, and we have a big bucket approach to retention periods. And we did that as a big simplification exercise a few years ago, just prior to implementing the new retention labels in SharePoint. So we do have other records in other systems, in other applications. And we have a whole process around risk assessing those applications to make sure that data, well, for want of a better word, and I'm not an IT person, that sort of structured data is also managed in a compliant way from a retention perspective. But as I say, mainly, I think you're interested in what we do with our information, our unstructured information. We we have a definition of what is a record. It's part of our code of conduct, and everybody in Shell has to, contractors or staff have to take training in the code of conduct. And our philosophy is that records are important assets, are important information, just like we have oil rigs and all sorts of things like that. Information is a really valuable asset. And the businesses, as you can imagine, use that information all sorts of different ways. And obviously that creates risk. Our biggest risk, one of the risks that we're addressing in our program around our retention is getting rid of information that we no longer need. And we call that our non-records. So we just have two types of information, records and non-records. And records are kept according to the group retention schedule, and non-records, we are in the process of implementing a retention policy, an automatic deletion policy for non-records for 3 years. Of course, subject to applying any preservation holds on if we need to. So our records, as part of our code of conduct, are maintained and in accordance with that. And we believe that, well, we consider our records to be corporate assets, and as such have to be in shared spaces. And that's I think really important principle. I mean, just listening to what James was talking about in terms of all the challenges, I mean, I must say I was relieved to hear that there are all these challenges that everyone else has got around emails, and I'll come on to talk about emails in a minute, because we have the same ones. But we take the position that anything that is a record is a corporate asset and has to be kept in a shared space. And the shared space, we mean a space that is not personal to us. And in the context of this conversation, that's obviously our email inbox, and also our OneDrive accounts in SharePoint. We all have a OneDrive account in SharePoint and in the inbox, obviously. And we take the view that we will not allow people to apply retention labels in those spaces. If you want, those spaces have a 3-year retention period applied as an automatic removal of anything that's not been modified for 3 years. And we have successfully implemented that across our OneDrive in June this year. And we have set ourselves the milestone of implementing that in our emails in March, by the end of March next year. So it's a journey for us at the moment. But that is a philosophy that we will not allow people to keep anything that's a corporate asset, our records, in a personal space. So if you do have records, for example, if you have information, you create information in your OneDrive and you need to keep it longer than 3 years as a record, then you need to put it in a SharePoint site. I'm just looking at my notes on what James said. Interesting, your the discussion, the distinction between personal emails and business emails. When we did the OneDrive, we realized that people do keep personal information in their OneDrives as well. And actually, from a practical sense, when you say personal information, that's quite a difficult terminology, because then you're getting into, well, if it's personal to me and it's got personal data in, and I can keep it for myself, but I can't keep anything that's got personal data in relating to other people. So we call anything that is personal to us as a person our private information, and we've made that distinct, very distinct in all our communications. And basically, if you have private information, and this will include emails that you need to keep, you want to keep, then Shell's not the place to keep that. That's where you work, and that's where your corporate information is kept. But if you want to keep personal information, i.e. what we call private information, that has to go home. We don't allow that to be kept as a record, i.e. longer than 3 years. And when we implemented it, the retention policy in OneDrive, we encourage people to send that private information home. And we will do the same for emails. So I'm not sure if this is what you wanted to hear or not. So I'll just carry on. And
Susan, I think we've lost your voice.
oh yeah, sorry, yeah, I just pressed the I just pressed this. Okay, so I'll carry on and then I'll stop. So just looking specifically at emails and what our strategic direction is for emails. When we comes to what is a record in Shell, we look at the content. We don't look at who it's from or who made it, or it's really the content. So that's what will be an email record, what it actually contains. Is it an approval? Is it contain financial information? And James talked about the relative importance of different people who might have records. Now, I'm just going to pick up on that because we have this debate quite a lot at the moment with the business, because they're all working towards that change management to implement that non-record disposal policy of 3 years on the 31st of March. And there's a wide variety of views, because actually it's not necessarily the most important people that have email records. In fact, sometimes it's quite junior staff that create email records if they're dealing with customers and creating customer agreements and dealing with different customer issues, for example. So for us, being able to say that a certain person create all their records are emails, all their emails are records, wouldn't necessarily fly in many cases. Although, of course, our EC, we would probably say most of their records are emails. Emails are records, but actually, no, not anyway. Let's not go there. It's not a very binary. I think James did mention a binary decision as to that, nor whether it's a personal or private email or not. But anyway, in terms of our email strategy going forward, so as I say, no records in our inbox. We're implementing a non-record disposal on the 31st of March next year, when the policy will be switched on. People like myself, who've worked at Shell for 20 years, I have a lot of emails in PSTs, and I have to decide if any of those are records or not. And we have some email pioneers of various levels of seniority in the company. And actually what we're finding is most people, when they really truly look through their emails, they haven't got many records that they need to keep long term, or if they have, they've already put them in sort of relevant systems. And I'm mentioning like personnel systems like Workday and places like that. So that's our process, our policy for inboxes. In terms of the so we have legacy. I'm talking about this. Look on the bottom right to me, the legacy box there. So what are people going to do if they've got email records? And they may well have email records because, as I said, it's the content that determines whether it's a record or not. And they will need to put them in what Vivek referred to in the chat, new functionality that Microsoft have implemented, which is labeling in shared mailboxes. Sticking with the principle that emails need to go into a shared space if they're records, we are setting up shared mailboxes for people to put their email records in and apply a default so that they can simply drag and drop them into their shared mailbox, and they'll be labeled with the appropriate retention period. And I think, yeah, so on that, that also talks to a point about getting people who have, when they leave, access to all their emails. This is a problem for us. we've got people who leave, and our email policy, I think, is when you leave, your emails are wiped out after 90 days. So if I did leave now, today, 90 days time, my PSTs, my inbox would just all go. And that's corporate knowledge basically being wiped clean. So that's one of the risk areas that we are addressing in this approach with shared mailboxes. People will need to put their emails into a shared mailbox and label it as a record, and that way that the access to that mailbox can be changed in accordance with people who take over that matter or take over their work. And over a period of time, long term, we will remove that risk of emails being basically deleted when someone leaves and corporate knowledge being removed, but also that process of getting access to other people who've worked on a matter or a project. So also feeling a little bit, again, going against the purists in the room, and James did quote somebody who talked about records should be kept in their native environment. We are going to be moving some emails into SharePoint as well. That's the two options that we're going to be giving people and are giving people to prepare for the policy that I mentioned. It's not ideal, and as you say, there is no integration. So actually that serves in a way a good, people have to be serious if they really want to keep something to put it into SharePoint. And I actually agree. I don't think we should be pushing record emails into SharePoint long term. But I have to say, we do have considerable pushback from the business in that. They do want a seat at the table with Microsoft to persuade them to reverse their stance on that. But as you can see, that's a challenge for us as well. And then finally, the strategic direction for us is Teams, Microsoft Teams. I echo all the chat comments and other comments people have made about Teams, and what do we do with the chat. It's difficult for e-discovery purposes. There's lots of open questions about that. But I do genuinely believe that as we move away from, my kids don't really know what emails are. They use them to reset their passwords. They do all their chatting on in WhatsApp and all. I don't know what they use actually. It's beyond me. So emails are whether we like it or not going to be the younger generation. They're not going to be around for much longer in terms of how the young people coming through are going to work. I don't think. That's just my personal opinion. So look, I'm mindful of time. I don't want to take up the whole day. So I'm going to stop there and see if you've got any questions, or if I've missed something, if this is what you expected me to talk about or anything else.
Thank you so much, Susan. So guys, you've got loads of chat there. We're opening for you to either to ask Susan directly while we're here, because obviously she provides us a more structured, a different way of controlling definitions and while adhering to some of the policies. Guys, I'll open it for you to ask Susan some questions.
Oh, should I do I need to read the chat?
Yeah, please unmute yourself. Please ask Susan the question.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Susan. Susan, thank you very much. That was hugely interesting, and thanks also, James, if you're listening. I was bowled over by both of those papers. Can I ask Susan if you could maybe just tell us a wee bit more about this sending home policy that you have? I'm slightly more interested in that, because it seems to me, without knowing how it works, and that's the crux of the matter, there are potential difficulties around that with meeting your legislative obligations. And I'm just wondering if you can tell us a wee bit more about what gets sent home, how you regulate what gets sent home, are you able to control what gets sent home, and is Shell at all concerned about stuff getting sent home that perhaps shouldn't get sent home? How's that managed?
Yeah, gosh, that's quite a big question. So we do monitor. We do have monitoring in place. It's mainly to monitor against certain keywords of things that are being sent home, like most confidential or confidential materials. I don't know the actual details of what we screen for, but we do screen. And we also screen, I think, in terms of volumes of content, large volumes being sent out. Yes, of course, it's a concern. We don't endorse, we're only endorsing or asking people to send things home that are truly theirs. And the test for that is, if you were to leave Shell, would you expect to take it with you? And anything you do in the business, the day-to-day business of working for Shell, belongs to Shell. It's a Shell asset. So anything that is required for us and our regulators is a Shell asset, and we do not want people sending that home, and they absolutely shouldn't send it home. In our code of conduct is very explicit about the way people should work with their information. We have rules and guidance about that in several levels of detail. But the point is just that we also say to people, if you want to keep your own private stuff, that if there's in the process that you've been working at Shell, you've got some things, I don't know, it might be there may be their payslip. That is the only kind of thing that you're allowed to send home. It may be, I don't know, you may have used your computer to, I don't know, your wedding list or something, I don't know, it's a bad example, and you want to keep that for posterity. You can send that home, but absolutely not to send anything that relates to corporate information, including, so, even if you're working and, you just got a SharePoint pack, a PowerPoint slide or something you want to work on your home computer, that's not permitted. And so you might say, well, people will do that anyway. Well, yes, they could do. We've got some screening in place, but it's a code of conduct issue if they do, and we will there will be repercussions from an employment perspective in that sense. So we're not asking people to send things home. We're just allowing them to send things home that are truly theirs, and I think that's a subtle difference.
No, thank you very much for that. I'm sure we work with public authorities in the public sector,
sure.
and I'm sure every single one of them would love it if people would send stuff home, because their drives are currently stuffed full of family photographs and pictures and pay slips and God knows what else. So yeah, they would love if people would send stuff home, but there are obvious potentially regulatory concerns around that. So it's just how you manage that, basically. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, I mean, we have a fair use policy as well with our IT. I mean, we recognise that people do have to have an element of personal or private content on their laptop, but actually, people should also have their own laptop. We don't provide private storage for people, so it's a fair usage policy. So we would not expect people or allow people really to have high volumes of their own personal photos. I think people have had them. They had them on their OneDrive, but if they have them now, they will disappear after 3 years.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get it. It's a very messy picture whenever you sit in public or private sector. I'm sure it's the management of it, it's the regulation of it to make sure we're not somehow creating a wee stash of corporate information somewhere offline that could bring the organisation into a sticky place at some point in the future. But yeah, it's very difficult to manage that. I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And Vivek, did I miss anything? I am getting cross-eyed with all the chats, Vivek. So, okay, would you like to comment on some of the things that I may have missed on the chat line, Vivek?
I think Vivek's just left. He just pinged me to say that he had a clash, so he sent apologies.
Oh, okay, Mark. Is there something that we have missed? Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think Susan covered it really well, and I think just to sort of add to that sort of last point as well, I think getting people to understand what their information has been a big part of this as well. Getting people to do the work for you so that they are able to recognize what records are, what non-records are, know what private information is, know what corporate information is. That's still a massive ongoing challenge, but I think it's one that you have to look into, to go in hand with the technology to really make this work. And I think that at the beginning there's going to be a few teething problems, as you know, people probably send stuff that they shouldn't, and you know, keep stuff that they shouldn't, and let stuff get deleted that they shouldn't. But the idea is that sort of in the long run, in sort of 5-10 years time, you know, you'll have much higher levels of compliance.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's not a perfect world, and you know, but we have to try. I mean, I think as James kind of alluded to, when we first started with our emails and that, no one said, right, this is what you can keep by email. This is what you can keep. This is what you have to, you know, not keep. There were no boundaries were established, so we're now having to catch up and put those boundaries in place, and that's harder than putting them in place to begin with. But it's an interesting challenge.
Thank you, Susan. And okay, let me just get the lady who's from the NHS before I call Aldo.
That's me, Catherine. So it was really well, it was a question for Susan and just something for everybody to think about. Is James was talking a lot about let's try and automate things as far as possible, because we can never rely on user behavior. Whereas Susan, your approach has been much more about let's put the governance in place so that people know what they can do. And I mean, my own feeling is that you need a bit of both. You automate what you can, but I think there will always be a place for establishing what it's okay to do and trying to get that message out to people, even though people are the weakest link in any kind of compliance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, you work at Shell, and we have a very strict code of conduct, and information management is just one of the strands, and everybody is accountable, and we start with that. However, we will be looking at automation. I mean, so far we don't think the automated tools, you know, artificial intelligence and all those things haven't got to the point where we can actually use them at the moment. I mean, we have a level of automation. We use default labeling, and we have automatic disposal. So we do. But I mean, you know, as James was mentioning, let me look at my notes about, you know, that binary decision, is it a personal email or not? That and different people, whether they have records or not. I think that's more difficult in our organisation at the moment, anyway. But I hope it will come. We're definitely not averse to automation, but like you say, I think it's a bit of both. And at the end of the day as well, it is about being accountable as an individual, and that's what working at Shell is about, and compliance. But we will obviously help people with that as much as possible and build on that as we go forward.
Sounds like you have a good culture.
Yeah.
Thank you. So hopefully at some point our Public Records Act and the PRSAU would, you know, thinking through an approach like that would be helpful. Aldo, yes, I saw your hand, please.
Hi, Susan. First of all, thank you for the presentation, which was a really interesting, really wonderful. Thank you. So actually, I have a couple of observations. So first of all, yes, I agree. Yeah, we are doing something very similar to what you say, this binary selection between it's private and or it is work. So what we are also doing at the moment and researching at the university at the moment, and I would like to have your opinion on this, is actually after this, we have made this decision, is it work? Then actually we try to manage, and we are assessing the system that should manage the information based on the nature of the system itself. So for example, what we have done is that what we have understood is that Teams as a chat functionality is really good to have discussion which are temporary, but we are trying, and therefore we are trying to drive our employees to have their just the ephemeral discussion, temporary discussion, which is not going to retain for, it's just very, very short term, temporary, while email seems to be more long term, more official. So then actually we are moving more official information to be there. So I wanted to have your opinion on this. Use the right tool for the right type of information approach, as well as apart from this, if you have any tips about how to solve legacy problems with existing emails, and if you may share anything. I mean, the one already sitting on someone email inbox, and then after the solution has been implemented, how do we manage this? Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing I think you mentioned was, you know, perhaps giving guidance as to which tools to use when for what kind of situations, sort of emails for longer term information, and maybe short chats using that for sort of more transient information. Well, I mean, that's definitely an approach. We haven't done that yet. I'm not sure we will. I mean, I think we do see eventually, you know, really getting down to the bare minimum for emails because of all the challenges that you know it presents. But where and how we move totally onto something like the Teams chat with all the sort of different functionality challenges it has, I'm not sure when that will happen. So I mean, I really think that we will get to that saying that you use email for this. I think we will eventually just evolve almost altogether off email. And we're looking at you know, many more of our systems to put email like correspondence in. I mean, I mentioned Workday. I mean, we've just implemented Workday. I think pretty much finished now from another system we had, and that's much more rich in terms of recording, being able to record personnel data and conversations with line managers and all those sorts of things. So that's a system that I think we can almost get away with a lot of emails just by implementing that. But that's going to take quite a lot of time to get people to behave and change in that way. So I'm not sure I can comment much more than that on the different types of communication methods for different types of things. We haven't done a lot of thinking in that, and I'm not sure we would do. And then the other thing we talk about, legacy, getting people to deal with their legacy emails. Well, gosh, I mean, I can't see Mark, but I'm sure he's smiling like I am about this. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard. We're adopting a very pragmatic approach to it, really encouraging people to make some risk-based decisions based when they look at their 20 years of emails. We've given them search and help them with their searching, maybe searching on different project names. We've given them all the guidance we can to help them do that. But the main thing we've said to them, I think, is two things: is don't look at every email. You're not expected to go through those millions of emails one by one. But equally, we are going to be forgiving, and we're going to let you let it go. And so that's a cultural thing, because people are very scared about how they are perceived if they then can't find something. So we've also backed that up with lots of work around the types of emails, who should keep types of emails. So if you're an approver giving an approval, then you shouldn't need to keep the approval you gave. That's for the approvee, if you like, the person receiving the approval, to put it with the project documents or whatever's being approved. And that, you know, that's like, there is like hundreds of those sorts of things we can do, but we're starting building all those different scenarios. We're also encouraging the businesses to look at their processes, and where emails are generated as part of that process, that is embedded in those ways of working of that process. And so when people are looking at their legacy emails, they can look at that with the knowledge that if they're in a particular role in a project, they don't need to do those emails. They've got other people who will be doing that when they search for them and look for them. But it's not a perfect world, and it's definitely not a science by any. I think someone mentioned the word amnesty. I think we are giving people a bit of an amnesty. There'll be definitely people who over retain and keep everything, and that's not good because the personal data, that's one of the risks we're addressing here. But equally, there'll be people who find they're missing something. But we've got to get to that point where we start and then we move forward from the 31st of March, hopefully next year when we switch it on. So, I mean, I don't know anything. Would you want to say, Mark, if you're still online, what else would you say to someone in dealing with email legacy?
Yeah, I think we've been doing a lot of sort of pioneer sort of experiences with this as well, to sort of I suppose sort of reinforce some of our understanding and work out what the pain points are, and they are typically what you'd sort of expect. And you know, when I was doing a lot of the sort of change elements on the ground, trying to go out and publicize and promote what we were doing and make sure people knew what was going on. And certainly the tone and the sentiment has changed as we incrementally introduced it. So and we've done it in such a way that it's built up, and we've kind of left email to last deliberately, knowing that that's going to be the most sensitive with the most sort of the most information in it. And you know, I've had, you know, when we're doing sort of awareness around OneDrive, people literally poking me in the chest, sneering at me, talking about how they're going to work through 20,000 emails, 100,000 in some cases, and things like that. So, you know, to say it's sensitive is a bit of an understatement for people to go through and do it. So, you know, but what I think we've all sort of garnered from this is that actually when people do it, it's never as bad as they first think it is. They don't have as many records. They don't spend as much time as they think they're going to do originally, and giving them sort of, I suppose, dividing the workload up into sort of bite-sized chunks of people and getting those experiences out there to show that we've sort of considered it was really helpful as well, to help people get their head around that sort of upfront effort of doing it. And you know, having the NRD policy is really helpful, and just, you know, giving people a specific deadline that wasn't going to move, that it was non-negotiable, that people had to adhere to, was a really key element in it as well. And you know, when it was first looked at, I don't think there was ever enough time in the world for people to go and do it. But being sort of quite bold with that and implementing quite an aggressive timeline by some standards actually helped get people started. Otherwise, people would have just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it down the road, because I don't think there's ever a good time to go through your legacy information to pick out records. You're always busy. You know, you've always got your end users focusing on, you know, the bottom line, and this is sort of considered a big task and a chore for people to do. So really just getting out there in the communications, telling people that you understand it, and trying to break it up for people and give people the experiences of people who have done it, I think was really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that, and now thinking about it, is back to the regulation point. I mean, we've done focused communications on areas where we know have a high level of emails that may needed to be kept from a regulatory perspective. For tax and finance, we've had specific focus on those areas to make sure that we give them extra guidance of the types of things that they need to keep. So, you know, we have also done that to make sure. And then secondly, the benchmarking that we did before this with our similar companies showed that most people don't do any preparation until about a month before. And other companies that when they implemented this, they basically said, we're switching it on into a 2 months time. Do what you can. Tough if you can't sort your emails out because it's being switched on. So we've done a lot more than a lot of companies do.
Yeah. Yep, I've seen that. So thank you very much, Susan and Mark. James, your view on this one as well? Just a quick one. James Lappin.
Hi, Maria. What can you do with legacy email? You can't use human effort to go back over legacy. And I think that's going to be one difference between machines and humans, is that we will be able to use machines once we've trained them to go back over legacy. So I'm wondering whether one option for us is to say to people, look, we just want you to do X, and X might be tagging your personal and trivial mail, or X might be.
James, I think
for a
we've
really
lost.
short period, 2 weeks, 4 weeks.
James, I think
and then
we're
the
losing you.
machine.
James, I think we're losing you on the. Okay. Okay. Maybe turn the video off, James, so we could optimize the voice. Yes, there you go. So
can you hear me now?
Yes, we could hear you. Yep. The video. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just one way forward. Microsoft. I mean, one thing I think we should talk to Microsoft about is about this idea of trainable classifiers that they're introducing. And like I said, the first trainable classifier I would want with email is a trainable classifier that identifies personal email. Because if we can train one up to do that, then we can go back over legacy, can't we? Because legacy is no barrier to machines.
That certainly is a good idea with the what about Bruce Mason? Are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Very
Bruce, I
interesting
was going to
conversations.
ask with our big legacy migrations, with all these issues that they're saying, what are the solutions that we've done before or not, as the case may be, because they're too much of a problem.
You're looking for the one solution for everything, aren't you?
Maybe not.
No. I think one of the issues is that we do stumble across is that people have already implemented something like an archiving solution, and taking things out of an archiving solution into a new environment, so taking it into Microsoft 365, usually means extra work, extra effort, and an extra cost. And so sometimes that may be a good way of saying, actually, let's just wave goodbye to that stuff. That's the old stuff anyway. It's the old legacy stuff that you don't want to keep. So I think that does happen. But no, I don't have an answer. I'm interested to hear the approaches that a number of different people have looked at.
Yeah, and okay, thank you so much, Bruce. And what about Sean? Sean, I saw you raising your hand, Sean.
I was just going to ask, the project of shells, what sort of resources are involved in that? How long has the project been going? Do you have people dedicated solely to working on this policy, or is it part of your day-to-day work? How feasible is it for other people to implement a similar sort of approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do have a project. We have a central project which has a number of resources. We're well resourced in terms of a central team of change and communications people, and people like Vivek, who are our architect, design authorities, and yes, we have quite a significant amount of resource centrally to manage the change. This is essentially a change program, and we knew we've had several goes at this in our history. We've had a few years ago, but somebody from IT just sent an email out saying, in 3 months' time we're switching this on, and I mean it was a long while ago. It was before M365, and it was just no way that was going to fly. It takes senior stakeholders. We've got senior people championing this in the business. It's got EC approval for the 3 years. A huge effort in terms of getting people to buy in, because as Mark said, people feel very emotional about their information, and it's a cultural change, shifting that belief that information that people deal with at work doesn't actually belong to them. I've had numerous conversations with people who say, well, I developed this at work, so it's mine. Well, it's not yours because it was developed in Shell time and Shell resources. So you can't, well, it depends on your approach. If you want to do it like some of our competitors have done, and you've got a different culture, a culture whereby people do as they're told, then that's fine. But Shell is a much more collaborative, much more bring people along, much nicer culture than that. But you pay the price in terms of having to do the change and resource it. So it's a mixture, to answer your question, a mixture of a central project and but also business resources who do this as part of their day job as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Susan. And we're really close to the hour. I just wanted to hear from earlier, Espen. You did have some concerns that we have raised, and we knew that this was issues with email being personal in certain countries in Europe. And Susan, I know this is also a problem at Shell because of the operational environments beyond the UK. Espen from Archiverket, if you're still on the call. Okay, Espen must have jumped out already. What about Nikki? Any or Beth? Sorry, Beth. Any last words? Because I think everybody's trying to look at your capstone scenarios right now.
I would just say, let me know if you have any questions. I can pop my email down in the chat, and we could further clarify.
Yep.
Sorry, I got somebody visiting me.
No worries, no worries. I was going to say to everyone, as you know, as we do in the IRMS roundtable, what we are doing right now is just trying to uncover the things that we could that are obviously issues. And if it's very specific to a vendor like Microsoft, these are the things that we could bring into the cab. We're lucky that we've got the cab to bring it to. Those other issues where maybe the best one would be inviting people like Susan Lamb and James Lappin to help us with a new angle of doing things, because we just need that information and that new knowledge that we didn't know before, and other people like Bruce Mason and the rest, and Vivek as well. Then we will identify that. So this, as you know, this is not the first and the last roundtable for the email. What we're going to do is gather all the thoughts and the gold stuff that you have placed on the chat line, and we will organize it and make something out of it so that we could have our next roundtable and email identifying the challenges and the issues that we have uncovered in this, and of course all the gold nuggets that our speakers have given us as well. So please do watch out for our next event. And goodness, thank you so much. What can I say with the discussions all and ongoing on the chat, and everybody else. And Ren, can I call you back to just help us close
I'm
the
here.
session?
Hello. And actually, Maria, a huge thank you to you with your boundless energy and enthusiasm that helps really put all this together. And thank you, Susan, and thank you, James, and thank you to everyone else who's contributed. And as I put a little thing in the chat message just now, this will all feed into the process we have with Microsoft. We'll keep you posted on everything that happens with that. We've put together the forum to do direct engagement with our membership over wishes and needs and requirements. And last but not least, it's the end of month IRMS Halloween quiz tonight. So although I might not look like this, those joining will see me there. So thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.